Now that we know our variables, we can set up our equations. Now, there's a couple of things that run true with all of these equations. If we're dealing with an equation that talks about money, and this is talking about how much money they spent, then we're going to have one equation that's dealing with money, with the money numbers. So what we have to do is we have to get all the money into one equation, and then all the items, or in this case, the pounds, in another equation. So let's start. I normally start with the easiest one for me is the number of items, or the pounds. So it says right here that she bought a total of 10 pounds of fruit. So if she bought 10 pounds of fruit, she bought a combination of apples and oranges. So we can write that as an equation. Apples plus oranges equals 10 pounds of fruit. Okay, now that we've got the pounds or the items out of the way, now we have to deal with money. And when we're dealing with money, we know that she spent a total of $5.25. So we know that this whole thing has to equal $5.25. We also know that apples were 50 cents a pound, so that would be 0.5x. And we know that oranges were 75 cents a pound, so 0.75y. So now that we've looked at all the important information, we can put together our equation. So we have 0.5x plus 0.75y equals 525. We've now written our two systems of equations. Okay, so now let's look at our second example. So first thing we need to do is we need to figure out what our two variables are. Well, it says right here we're dealing with how many dimes. So that's going to be one variable. I'm going to go ahead and make that an x. And how many quarters. That's my second variable. I'm going to make that a y. So I can go ahead and write this out. X is dimes and y is quarters. Okay, so now we're going to have money. We're dealing with money, and we're also going to have a number of coins, or the total items. So let's just start with our number of coins. And when we're dealing with our number of coins, it says right here at the beginning, Justin has 35 dimes and quarters. So our number of coins equals 35, and it's a combination of dimes plus quarters. So we've got our first equation written. Now we have to deal with money. So with our money, we've been told that all of our money adds up to $5.75. So we know that our money is going to equal $5.75. What they didn't tell us, and so we've actually pointed it out here in the little box, is that you got to know what dimes and quarters are worth. So how much do we know that dimes are worth? They're worth 10 cents, so 0.10 x's. And what do we know quarters to be worth? Well, that's 0.25 y. Now we can put it together as an equation. So 0.10x plus 0.25y equals our $5.75. Okay, so take a minute and just look through and make sure you understand how we divided it up first as an x and a y, and then how we're taking it and figuring out our totals. Now let's look at problem number 3. Okay, so problem number 3 is talking about Timmy and his marbles. First thing we got to do is figure out what the two variables are. What are the two kinds of unknowns? Well, here it says we got plain marbles, so we'll make that our x. And we also have colored marbles. We'll make that our y. So let's go ahead and fill that out. Our x is plain, and our y is colored. Okay, now we have to come up with our two equations. So let's look at totals. We know that we have our total marbles comes up to 180 marbles. So right here we have some plain and some colored marbles equals to 180 marbles. So we know that x for our plain plus y for our colored, so some of the x's and some of the y's are going to equal 180 marbles. Okay, now this one's not dealing with money, but this one's dealing with a comparison. So just like when we were learning how to write comparison equations in class, we're going to have to write a comparison equation. So let's just think about it like a scale. You have to keep a scale balanced. So I always start with which one has more. Do we have more plain marbles or do we have more colored marbles? And in this case, we have 32 more plain marbles. So our plain marbles have more. So we're going to put that alone on one side of the scale. So right now we have more on that side of the scale, so it's lower. It's heavier. The other side of the scale, we need to add something to it to make it even. So how many marbles do we need to add to our colored marbles? Well, it says 32. So if you put the variable that has the most on one side by itself, put it equal to the other variable, and add what they need to have brought up to it. So there's our two equations. Okay, another really popular kind of equation they love to give us are equations talking about perimeter. A perimeter is a total. So our first thing we have to do is we have to figure out our two unknown variables. Well, if you think about it, if we are talking about a rectangle, we're talking about our length times our width. So our two unknown variables are to figure out our length and our width. So we're going to say the length is going to be x, and we'll make our width our y value. So now that I've made that decision, and did it matter which one I gave it? No. I had to pick, but now that I have picked, I have to go ahead and write that my x is going to be my length. And my y is going to be my width. Whichever I pick is fine, I just have to know which is which is why I go ahead and write them down. Okay, so I know the total perimeter of my rectangle is 20 inches. So I know my total perimeter equals 20. So the real question is, how do I write perimeter? Well, if you can remember from earlier, probably 8th grade, 7th grade, perimeter is just the outside of our rectangle. So L plus W plus L plus W. That's usually written as 2 L's, 2 lengths, plus 2 W's. So we're going to go ahead and write that out. But what do we have? What is our L? That's really going to be our X. And what is our width? That's really going to be our Y. So our equation is going to be 2x plus 2w. So let's write that down. 2x plus 2w. Oops, I did it. 2x plus 2y. Let's rewrite that. 2y. 2x plus 2y equals 20. So I've got my first equation. Okay, so now we look at our second equation. It's a comparison equation. And it says my length is 3 more than the width. So my length has more. So I'm going to head and write my length is, because my length has more, 3 inches more than the width. So it's going to have to be the width plus 3 inches. And if we just look at our rectangle now, we know that our length is x and our width is y plus 3. Y plus 3. So those are my two equations. Okay, so on the second side, what we're going to do is I'm going to let you start to do some of this on your own. So first thing I want you to do is to look at number 1 and pick the two variables. Pause the video once you've got your two variables labeled, then start the video and make sure that you got it. Okay, so on this one, I saw the word red bricks first, so it got underlined and it got an X. Then I found gray bricks, it got underlined, it got a Y. If you did it opposite of that, that's perfectly fine as long as you know which stands for which. Okay, so now let's write the two equations. So pause your video and see if you can figure out what the two equations are, and then start the video. Okay, so if we look at this very last sentence, the very last sentence gives us both of our totals. She spent a total of $160 on a total of 60 bricks. So the first thing I did was I put my two equals, did equals 60 and equals 160. Then I already know 60 bricks, that's a combination of red bricks plus gray bricks. So x plus y equals 60. Then when I'm dealing with money, I'm going to have to, she spent money, so I'm going to have to look at my equation and figure out how much money. So $2 for red bricks, that's 2x, and $3 for gray bricks, that's 3y. So I just put those together. 2x plus 3y equals $160. Okay, now let's do 1b. Again, the first thing you're going to do is pick your two variables. Then you're going to start finding your totals. So when you're dealing with money, you'll look for your money totals and all your money. And your other equation's just going to deal with the number of lawns. So give it a shot. Pause your video when you have everything done. Start it back up and check your work. Okay, so our two variables are the small lawns and the large lawns. So I went through and I underlined small lawn and gave it an X, and large lawn and gave it a Y. Then I went ahead and just added the money to it because I knew that it was $20 per each small lawn, so I did 20X, and $30 for each large lawn, 30Y. Then I went down and found my totals. I had a total of 6 yards, and I also had a total of $140. So I started with my yards. I knew that there was some combination of small lawns and large lawns that was going to equal 6. So x plus y equals 6. And then I knew that it was $20 for the small lawns plus $30 for the large lawns equals the $140. Okay, again, on the new one, this is talking about flowers. So we'll have number of flowers as a total and number of money. Pause the video, see what you can do. Okay, so I went ahead and underlined, and blue flowers were first, so I gave them X. Pink flowers were second, they got a Y. Above it I notated the money, so it was $1 for the blue flowers, so 1X, $2 for the pink flowers, so 2Y. Then I looked at my totals, and I had a total of spending $18. So I went ahead and created that equation. $1 times the blue flowers, so 1X, plus $2 times the pink flowers, 2Y, equals $18. My second equation was a comparison. So what I went and notated was which one had more. Well, she bought more blue flowers. So my blue flowers X will be alone on one side of the equation, and it equals the Y, pink flowers, plus 12. Okay, let's go ahead and look at the next one. And this is talking about Andy and his birthday party, the number of people that came, and the cost. So go ahead, pause your video, it's your very last one, and get your variables and equations, then check back and see how you did. Okay, so when I started labeling this one, I circled, or I said X for the students, underline that, and underline the adults for Y. And then I went ahead and circled the money. $4 for the students, so I notated 4X. $6 for the adults, so I notated 6Y. And then I did a double underline on my totals. I had a total of 12 people coming and a total of $56 spent. And then I wrote my two equations. The only thing I didn't do, and I'll do it right now, is my X's were students and my Y's were adults. It's good to go ahead and write that out on the blanks so that later if it says, well, how many students came, and I make a solution, I know that students is talking about the X value. So if you have any questions, come to tutoring and we will talk about this more in class.